Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in the third decan of Leo. Hope that you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon out there. There's been a lot going on. Did I miss anything in the week that I was off? I think there's been a lot going on in the collective, and hopefully we will touch on some of those challenges today, and hopefully we'll be able to see through the lens of astrology ways to work through the upcoming weeks and process some of the things we've been experiencing as a group and as a collective over the last few weeks. And hopefully we'll be able to open up some dialogue and be able to talk about some things with grace that are on our minds and work through some of those issues. So if you're in the chat here, let me know that you're here. And welcome. And I hope that everything's going well your way. Got Dee stopping in from over in the UK. Hope everything's going well your way, Dee. Hope everything is, smashing over there across the pond. Says I am now in York, but you know the rest. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, friend, and I'm glad that you're doing well. So it's nice to see you here, friend. We've got Tanya's in the chat. What's up, Tanya? Nice to see you. Tanya's here today. Okay. Javiera is here, says, hola. Nice to see you, Javiera. I hope everything's going well your way, my friend, north of the border. All right. Thanks for stopping in, friends. Let's do a few announcements, and then we'll dive into it. Couple things. So you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. If you are, that's not what we wanted to do. This is the one. There it is. What is going on here? There we go. You can find me over at spencermichaud.com. If you are in need of help, if you're in need of a reading or in need of some guidance, go check out the Book Now button, and we will help you to work through any of the challenges that you're going through with the upcoming eclipse season, which can be very powerful chapter markers. And you can find all sorts of other stuff there as well. I'm also starting a new book club, the Tolkien Book Club here. This is the Wednesday night book club now. So we've got a Wednesday night book club where we're going to be going through some of the secondary works in Tolkien's Legendarium. We've gone through The Hobbit, we've gone through The Lord of the Rings, we've gone through The Silmarillion. Now we're going to be working through a book called Beren and Luthien, which is one of the great tales. We've got a really nice group of people that get together. We've changed the time to an evening time. It'll be every second and fourth Monday. So if you're interested in that, reach out. We're going to be meeting this next Wednesday to start discussing Beren and Luthien, which is one of the great love stories in Tolkien. So I hope that you'll join me for that. You can also find over at spencermichaud.com some of the teaching materials that I have, including the Decan webinars, the Dignity and Devotion webinars, and Stars and Cards. And of course, you can visit Tanya Andrews at Third Coast Mojo. She's got all sorts of really cool stuff, including Iron Teeth and Exalted Mars, offering Luminous Luna and Exalted Moon in Taurus, Crown of Success, Sun in Leo, and then the Master Key with Mercury in Virgo. So check her out over there. And finally, if you want to know when I'm going live, you can subscribe to the newsletter and get updates as far as what's going on with Third Coast Mojo and classes, etc. And if you want to support the channel, you can purchase a super chat here while I'm live or go to buymeacoffee.com. Okay, that is the announcements. Stella Rendition is here. How you doing, Stella? So today we're going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in Leo 3. Before we dive into that, we have some elephants in the room, right? We have some things that are going on in the astrological world. And I think we should address that first before we dive into the astrology. I'm going to try to go through this with my best attempt at nonviolent communication. I've been reading this book by Marshall Rosenberg, and it's been helping me to kind of create space between my feelings and the expression of them. And it also is a lesson in empathy. And one of the things that we've been experiencing in the astrological world or community, I guess you could say, is a real challenging situation where an elder astrologer, a very prominent person in the field, made a racial slur on a podcast and created a lot of harm, created a lot of damage and hurt in our community. And it's been raising a lot of discussion and a lot of feelings and righteous anger. And I think that, I guess what I would like to say is I want this to be a place where people feel safe and where I want to be able to see and hold space for people and to be able to feel like they can express those feelings and that those feelings are valid, and that my observation, I've been observing over the last few days and trying to see how things are, see how the story is going to unfold. And I'm feeling a lot of sadness right now. I'm feeling a lot of anger and sadness and disappointment, and I'm really sad that those types of hurtful remarks are still prevalent out in the world, and especially in our community where a lot of people go to find safety and security and guidance. And I'm disappointed at the breaking of trust with those actions. Of course, that is never acceptable in any form, in any circumstance. And I just, I hear you, I see you, those of you who are feeling upset and violated and disempowered. And I just want to hold some space for you. So if you have anything that you want to say in the chat or anything like that, or you need someone to hold some space for you in that, hopefully we can do that here today. I wanted to say that first before we dive into the analysis type of thing. One of the things I've been learning through learning through Marshall Rosenberg and through this North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo type of experience is a lot of times we can jump, especially as teachers and especially as people who want to guide others, we can jump into an intellectual analysis. We can jump into rationalizations and defense mechanisms. And I just wanted to leave some space in the beginning of this broadcast to just acknowledge the pain that I'm observing just in a lot of sections of our community, especially with our astrologer people of color. And I'm witnessing it, and I want to acknowledge it, and I want to say that first. So I think that if we look at the kind of what happened here, we had we've had repercussions that have happened, justifiable ones in my opinion, where this person was slated to speak at a very important conference that's coming up in the next few weeks, I guess you could say, right? It's pretty close coming. It wasn't something that I was necessarily planning on attending this time, but I have attended the United Astrology Conference in the past. And I think they did the right thing by deplatforming Stephen Forrest and by removing him as a speaker. And I support those actions. And I think that that's the right accountability in this situation. Just I guess from a personal perspective, one of the things that I've been trying to work through is how to speak up about these things. It's something that I'm not super comfortable always doing. And I feel like, I don't know. I feel a lot of the emotions of the collective, and I feel a lot of the hurt, and sometimes it's overwhelming, and finding the right words to say sometimes is difficult, even though like this is kind of my job, is to try to find the right words to contextualize some of the astrological things. I think when we have such strong emotions, finding the right way to communicate is very difficult. So that's been my own personal struggle, but I've also had a desire not to center myself through this process. I want to listen. I want to hear what people are feeling and acknowledge those feelings and support people on the journey through repairing and helping others to repair. I think that one of the things I'm frustrated at as an observation is not only was the original podcast pretty egregious, I think, and obtuse, but there were other things in there, not just the racial slur that was said. There was a revisionist history of the Ku Klux Klan. There was some other just like flippantness that I found extremely distasteful, trying to make light of something, especially in the circumstances we find ourselves in culturally right now, as far as just the rise of authoritarianism and fascism all over the world right now, and the oppression of people of color in a myriad of situations. And it's disappointing to see people make light of that, and an issue that I feel is extraordinarily serious, and to do so with uneven power dynamics and all of that entails. I'm also disappointed in the response by Stephen Forrest. I think the most things that make people most angry when people have a lapse of awareness, judgment, or make a mistake is when someone doesn't take responsibility for the way that has affected other people. And no, it isn't going to affect everyone equally. Everyone is going to have a different reaction and a different set of feelings around that. But I think it's important to acknowledge what everybody's feeling around that, especially the people who have been harmed the most. And I think that to default back to defensiveness and to default back to rationalization is what is the most frustrating thing to witness. And this is something that I think is very important to talk about in light of this eclipse, because with the new moon solar eclipse in Leo, we're going to be having a south node eclipse that is going to be working through reducing our desire to defend a long-held, cherished belief or die on a hill. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that is an important point to make about it. I don't want to rush into the astrology rationalization, though. That's the hard part about this, is how do we speak about this without rushing to intellectualize it, and just hold space for the emotions and for the feelings that people are having around it, and then doing the important repair work to start hopefully rebuilding trust with each other and to repair the damage that was the real damage that is done in situations like this when people say things like that and then double down on it. So I hope that that makes my feelings clear on the matter. And I just if you have things that you need to express, I'm here to hold space and have that discussion with you here today as much as I can, and to support you. I see you, I hear you, and I support you in that journey. And yeah. Okay, let's look at the chat here. Dee says, coming from politics rather than astrology, I've had this discussion a lot recently. I would sooner tackle the thinking behind the slurs rather than worry about the slurs. I think that's a great point, Dee. There was a lot of problematic stuff in there. There was a revisionist history about the intentions of a terrorist organization. There was a lot of trying to define what is or is not racism from the eyes of someone who might not actually understand what it actually is. And it's, yeah, the thing I found most ironic about the whole discussion, I watched the whole thing, and I've watched the the fallout afterwards, and just seeing all of the different conversations that have been happening. There's a lot of conversation on Facebook. There's a lot of conversation on threads. There's people defending this person. There's people that are taking this person to task. And I would say I fall on the side of, repercussions and saying, hey, we need accountability. I like what people have been describing as, how do we get accountability culture versus cancel culture? But holding someone accountable is not cancel culture. That's feedback. That's when someone does something that hurts us, we're giving them feedback that it's hurtful. And I think that the most appropriate response to that is hearing that completely and taking that in without judgment, without a need to defend, without a need to deflect, or without a need to justify. And that to me is the most important part of this, that I think would be the road to healing. D says, on a personal note, I would sooner know where the bigots are than have them hiding away like some secret poisoning. I think that, well, we definitely had a revelation of that this week with the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. We talked the last live stream I did about the full moon in Aquarius and the power of the spotlight to bring some things that were really difficult to light. And I think that this eclipse is going to be doing that even more powerfully, or it's going to be another part of that chapter, not just in the astrological community, but in the grander collective as well. D says, I totally agree with the deplatforming. I think it was the absolute right thing to do. I don't think you can have a conference where people, even any of your population feels unsafe. And I think that it's, at best, it's a distraction. And at worst, people aren't feeling safe even being there. So I think that, yes, that is some of the, I think, natural consequences from those types of actions. And I definitely am in agreement and in support of the actions that were taken by the astrological organizations. D says, there are slurs that can apply to me, and I would sooner know who the people are that say it rather than have them silenced. I can stay away from them that way. That's true. I mean, that could be a way to protect ourselves if we're feeling that form of attack. And yeah, I agree. Like, I would rather know than have it be simmering underneath the surface. I think that this is, again, the irony of that podcast being about shadow work, right? And then people's shadows, jumping up to meet them is it's almost a little too on the nose. And this eclipse is, this particular eclipse, D, we've got it's a new moon solar eclipse. So the sun is being eclipsed by the moon, and it's like the moon is sort of shutting off the light or the rational parts of ourselves and bringing to light some of the more instinctual parts of ourselves that might have been hidden. So I think that there definitely is ways to connect it with the astrology. But yes, I think awareness helps us to make changes, I hope. Taku is here, says, hey, Spencer, hope happy to join you guys tonight. I'm happy that you're here too, friend. We're talking just a little bit we're processing some of the challenges in the greater astrological community this week. And eventually we'll be contextualizing that within some of the astrology coming up and review some of the astrology we've experienced. Okay. All right. So let's start diving into it. So I hope that we've adequately addressed that. It is an ongoing process as far as how do we learn from this and how do we hold people accountable? How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we have tough discussions that need to be had about equality, about creating a world where people feel safe to be themselves, where we celebrate diversity rather than trying to censor it or to eliminate it? These are some of the things that I'm interested in, is how do we become a bridge to a better society where these types of power dynamics start to become healed and start to become rebalanced and reharmonized, where power structures become rebalanced and reharmonized, where equality between people becomes reharmonized and rebalanced. And we do have to acknowledge the past around that, and we do have to acknowledge the things that were hurtful and the systemic challenges around that too, the historical challenges around it. All of these things filter into this. My head's been swimming for the last week because for those of you who have followed the channel for a long time, I mean, I like to think of things from like a million different perspectives. And there was just so many different ways to contextualize this from a historical perspective, from the organizational perspective, from the communal perspective, from the people, mostly from the people who have been suffering the most from those actions perspective, of how to be a good supporter, an ally in those situations, a lot of those things. And I think that it is important to recognize that we're not going to dismantle years and years and years of racism in one podcast, but we can hopefully, start the process of healing through holding space and, first of all, acknowledging the pain that it causes, acknowledging how actions can cause other people pain. That's number one. That is empathy 101, right? Like just acknowledging that is really important. And it feels like empathy is something that is under attack in our modern society by people in power, by white supremacists, by oligarchs, by fascism, because when we stop having empathy for one another, we just go further and further into division, and that allows people to control other people through systemic power structures. So empathy is number one. All right. So I hope that is clear in this on this channel and in this particular situation and moving forward. Okay. So let's talk about this eclipse. New Moon Solar Eclipse, Leo 3. August the 12th, next Wednesday. It's a big one. I think it's one that is activating a lot of reflection around centralized power, around, kingship, I guess you could say, like, or whatever version of that leadership you want to apply to the modern world, and potentially a need for leadership to transition to something that is more communal or something that is more celebratory of equality. I think that this new moon solar eclipse being co-present with K2 is another name for the South Node. And the South Node is a point of release. It is a drain, right? It is a point where we're releasing energy. We are seeing the reduction of something that comes in contact with it. And we may need to reduce our defensiveness. We may need to reduce the desire to defend a position of power that is toxic, right? Or a belief system that is toxic, right? This is the thing. Like, how do we dismantle beliefs that we have that are so ingrained either in the social beliefs or individual beliefs, so that we can move away from domination and move towards, being able to work through social issues on a more level playing field. I think that's really what I'm picking up with this, and just through the actions that I've witnessed, and recognizing that there's still a long way to go. And we knew this. We knew there was a long way to go, but sometimes we, in a community like the astrological community or any spiritual community, there is a lot of spiritual bypassing that happens. There's a lot of thinking, well, this particular group of people is enlightened because they are trying to interpret the stars or interpret symbols or things of that nature. I have not found that to necessarily be the case. I think that any community is a community that has human flaws and that has its shadow side and has its corruption and has the things that are repressed. And I think that this is really like bringing a lot of that to the surface. Jupiter and Mercury are also co-present in the first decan of Leo. So we recently saw a Jupiter Cazimi where we might feel pressured to take on a new role or to take on a new persona, or we might feel the heat of a spotlight. And this is good. That Jupiter Cazimi was opposite the moon and Pluto. And I think it was, that feeling of that pressure to perform, that pressure of visibility, and, being subjected to the dark side of that as well, like the shadow side of visibility, where, there's a lot of challenges around, I don't know, like this whole lunar cycle has been very instructive about the internet and about visibility and taking on visibility and things of that nature. I've been witnessing a lot of conflicts around that in various circles. There was a large TikTok controversy that ended up in, some really challenging emotions, feelings, and circumstances there as well, that where the pain of the spotlight was bright. There's been, this circumstance in the astrological community. And then all of the other social challenges that we're all still going through as a group, like where we see the widening wealth inequality gap. We see the effects of climate change. We're seeing the effects of, voter suppression. We're heading into an election cycle in America right now. There is some signs of hope. We did in my state of Michigan elect, or in the primary, we elected a Democratic Socialist, Abdul El Said, to be the Democratic representative for Michigan, which is hopeful to me. I think that he represents a lot of the values that I've talked a lot about on this channel, as far as being someone who is caring about the well-being of the community and the collective. We've also seen a backlash after he won that primary of some of the ugly racism in America coming to the fore, insulting him and his heritage and things of that nature as well. So it's not just an astrological community issue. It is something that we're dealing with as a collective right now, the othering, right? When we talk about the first decan of Aquarius, we have the dark plutonic shadow of othering anybody or anyone and casting them into exile and the pain that causes. And that's coming into a lot of conflict right now with people that feel like they have or are entitled to positions of power. And I think it's the first one of many steps towards dismantling those power structures. And I do have some hope. I have some hopeful astrological things that I'm looking at, and I'm like, oh, well, this gives me a little bit of hope. Gives me hope that there was some accountability taken within this. Gives me hope that there's a lot of people that are connecting, unfortunately over trauma, but are connecting nonetheless. And I don't know. It's just a wild time. So Jupiter and Mercury co-present. Mercury will have just gone into an opposition with Pluto and is separating from that opposition. So this isn't really the end of the what role are you playing, right? With the Jupiter Cazimi, Jupiter is often associated with teachers, gurus, etc. And we're seeing like a dismantling of that energy of putting someone on a pedestal, right? A lot of times we do this in our society. Sometimes people are naturally born into a pedestal privileged position. Other times people ascend to that position. And I think it's really helping us collectively examine, should we be doing this? Like, how do we relate to each other as human beings, not as projections of or deifications of some kind of ideal that we're trying to aspire to? I think that's really important through this cycle as well. So the new moon will be opposite Pluto. So again, bringing the Plutonic elements into the eclipse cycle. Pluto, I like to call it a cosmic plunger, right? It's plunging all of the garbage and shit that we've repressed, that we've just pushed underground, that we don't want to deal with, sometimes out of convenience, sometimes out of discomfort, sometimes out of fear, right? Sometimes out of convenience. I don't know if I said that already, but there's, it brings it up. It says, hey, you got to deal with this. This isn't something that you can continue to repress, because the more you repress it, the more it festers. And when things start fester underground, like Dee was talking about, I'd rather know if someone is a bigot, right? Because then there's a way to deal with it, rather than it festering underground and festering in people's hearts. And how do we expose those things to the light to hopefully be able to start to transform that, heal, and repair that? And I think that this eclipse cycle is going to be really important for unfortunately dredging up, maybe not unfortunately, maybe fortunately, because when we're bringing things to the light, it gives us the opportunity to both self-examine and to examine how we relate to one another, and how maybe we can do better at relating to one another. K2 is going to be conjoining the fixed star Regulus. The fixed star Regulus has significations with eminence. So if you put 2 and 2 together, Regulus is around 0 degrees Virgo, 29 Leo. It has precessed into that 0 degrees Virgo territory, but I think it's close enough that this is a point of release. This is another, I think, signification of the reduction of eminence in various circles. We're seeing people that have risen to a position of power or of eminence, and then some of that getting kind of flushed down the drain through not only their own actions, but through their refusal to step down off of that toxic behavior, belief system, to own and take responsibility for that as well. So that's something where the drain comes for you. If you can't do that, I mean, it may come anyway, but you make it worse when you double down on it. And I think the nodes are really fated positions, extremely fated positions. And I like to describe astrology through different types of fate. If you've heard me on the channel talk about this, it's worth repeating. I've learned this through Robert Hand and Dorian Greenbaum. I saw talks, they both gave talks on this. So this is the source for this. The Hemermene being the fate that we are born into, that we can't really change. I feel like there's a lot of Hemermene that comes to the nodes, that these are experiences that we have to face, that there's not as much wiggle room or maneuverability around our Hemermene. These are the things we have to go through. The Ananke is what we experience, the fate that we create through the compelling force of the planets. Ananke is the force that compels the Earth to spin on its axis. And what happens when we are experiencing our fate through Ananke is we might be having these planets being representative, if not the actual activators, okay? Maybe being symbolic of forces that compel us to act through our ignorance, through our blind spots, through our shadows. When we take on the responsibility of pronoia, the type of fate that we create through our awareness and making better choices and aspiring to do better and to take responsibility for those compelling influences, that's when we're starting to use our agency to create a better outcome, rather than one that is just either a knee-jerk reaction, just an expression of instinct. Okay, it is more about how do we bring things consciously. So I think that eclipses are always really bringing, they have a lot of Hemermene, and we get to choose how do we react to that Hemermene Do we do it through our knee-jerk reactions? Do we do it through feeling compelled to act in a certain way? Or do we respond to the revelations in a way that is trying to bring light to our own Ananke? Okay. Let's talk about the sun and moon in Leo 3. D is asking, what podcast is it? It's the first I've heard about it. I don't know. I think that was the Leela. I think it may have been taken down now, to be honest with you. I watched the whole thing, but there's a transcript up somewhere. The Leela podcast with Stephen Forrest and Ricky Williams. So that is the one we're referring to. If you go on any astrology thread, on Threads or Astro Facebook, you're going to see a lot of conversation about it from very polarized positions. You have it seems like a lot of the divide is generational. So, that is a generalization, but I think that there has been some people coming to the defense of said astrologer, and then people that are calling for accountability. And some of it has been divided through Facebook and Threads. So that's kind of the observations I've had around that. Again, just to be clear, I fall on the side of accountability and of holding space for the people that have been hurt by this and not defending this person's actions whatsoever. So go, I guess, engage with it as much as you can, D, and then make your own determination about it. But yeah, I think he retracted that question. Oh, who did? Oh, D did? Okay. Let's talk about Sun and Moon in Leo 3. Okay. Sorry, I've got my beautiful partner is in the chat here today, keeping me updated on what is going on in the chat. All right, Sun and Moon in Leo 3. Let's talk about this through the lens of the decans. Here we go. So you could see here a very visual representation of some of the events that we've seen this week, right? Okay. Oh, well. Sorry that if you rejected that question, D. I apologize. I only see something in the chat, and I don't see it on YouTube. I'm using a program called StreamYard, so I still see your question. So I apologize if you didn't mean to ask it. So let's take a look at this Leo 3. What do you say? 7 of Wands. Here we see a figure who is standing on what could be perceived as a high position, the high ground, I guess, or trying to defend a position that they've attained against other wands that may be trying to knock them off of that position. There is an energy in this decan of defending a belief. And I've lived some of the life of this decan as a Leo 3 rising. My ascendant is about 20 degrees Leo, and my north node is 20 degrees Leo. So there's a lot going on with this eclipse. I'm kind of looking at it and I'm like, oh, what's going to happen there? What's going to unfold? But the basic gist of this is you have a story that the Leo decans are trying to explain. And I just wanted to welcome Bonnie here. Bonnie Gillespie is here. So glad to catch you live. I'm glad that you're here, Bonnie. I hope everything's going well your way. Okay. Let's look at that first, because we had the Leo 1 decan represented by the 5 of Wands. And this is where we're struggling and feeling the pressure to perform, where we had the Jupiter Cazimi, where we might have been testing a new role, maybe putting on a new mask, We may be feeling thrust out into visibility, and we have to learn how to wield that spotlight effectively. And maybe testing out different roles and different passions and different beliefs so that we can get to the second decan, which is the victory of authenticity, the victory of being our outer expression being in alignment with our inner truth and our inner reality. Okay. As we move to the third decan, we may have to defend that authenticity or that belief against people that may disagree or that may be hurt by that belief, or maybe kind of trying to ascend in their own fashion, right? And I think the interesting thing about this is that because the South Node is here, it corrupts this energy, right? Normally, if you have a Leo 3 type of thing, we have the energy of, this is the banner, the flag that you're planting, saying, this is my belief, and my back's against the wall, and I have to fight my way out, and I have to defend my authenticity type of thing. But with the South Node here, we may have an excess of that energy. We may have an excess of pride. We may have an excess of defending an outdated position, all right? And how do we step down willingly off of that throne or off of that position of power and make space for others through our objectivity and through our empathy? That to me is the real challenge and essence of the nodal shift for the North Node moving into Aquarius 3, leaving something behind and expanding our capacity for objectivity and equality. And the South Node in Leo 3 saying, hey, it's time to leave this old position behind. Sometimes it comes for you in a Hemermene type of way, where you are taken away from the position of power, through whether it's through your own Ananke or whether it's through just the Hemermene that is coming to meet you. Or it could be a position where you know intuitively that you need to step away from an old belief system or an old position of power, and you do it willingly through your pronoia. As I've been working through preparing myself mentally for the nodal shift, this book has been very helpful, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It's not a perfect book. I've read some criticisms of it when using it to deal with larger systemic and social issues, and I can understand some of the criticisms of it as well. But I would say, just from a personal perspective, what it has helped me to do in interpersonal relationships is create space, again, between the feelings that come up and other people's feelings, and not just be instantly reactive to other people's feelings, to be able to hold space for their feelings. If we make space between our expression of those feelings and the moment they arise, what we're doing is we're leaving space for understanding of someone else's perspective as well. I can't tell you how many times in the past, as a young Leo 3 rising, I just would get very angry or get very worked up about something that I believed in very strongly. And oftentimes when I was sharing these things, this is a Mars ruled decan. Make no mistakes, Mars ruled decan. Sometimes it came out in an aggressive or even like a violently communicative way, right? And that type of adrenaline will tear you apart. It will tear you apart. It will tear apart your relationships, and it will tear apart your communities. And how do we start to look at how to start to reduce the well, I said it. This is the Leo 3 kind of thing. Like, I said it and I'm going to double down on it, and the pride kicks in, right? Sometimes you have this look like, are you criticizing me? Because you can't possibly be talking to me, right? Like that's the kind of vibe that you get with this sometimes. And to be proactive, about creating space for others and for objectivity and for your own feelings, I think is really important. Let me reiterate some of the tenets of this because I think it's really important. Nonviolent communication says before we interact with other people, we need to observe what is happening. We need to observe without judgment. Okay. This is part of the reason I think I've had a delayed response this week is I've been attempting to observe without judgment. Even though my initial reaction was very, very negative towards the things that Mr. Forrest said. And this is another reason why nonviolent communication isn't perfect for social issues, because maybe it would be appropriate to make an instantaneous reaction and condemnation of that. The next stage of the work is to connect that observation to something that you're feeling. Okay, you say, I'm observing this, and therefore I feel this way. And what the feeling is giving you feedback on is a need that is not being met, right? Say, I'm feeling this because my need for this is not being met or is being met. I feel, but you could feel good if a need is being met. And then you make a request versus a demand. You request with the other person, would you be willing to do this so that we can get these particular needs met? You also have to be willing to receive other people's feelings that are connected to needs that they aren't getting met, and then be willing to receive their requests. And how do you kind of go into this back and forth type of thing? This is very, I've been talking to other Pluto and Libra generation people this week, and a lot of the things that we've been experiencing is how do we become bridge builders for equality? How do we become bridge builders in these generational conversations? How do we be also the real, very real fear of being in a conflict situation and not knowing the right way to help resolve it? And I think that is something that I've been feeling a lot, like that sometimes there isn't a way to start creating a peaceful resolution. Sometimes we just have to let the negative feelings and witness them, right? Sometimes we have to really allow for people to feel completely heard, right? That is huge. How do we become open to completely receiving someone in a thorough manner, rather than like rushing to a solution, rushing to a rationalization, rushing to an intellectualization of their feelings? And again, I'm witnessing a lot of pain in the collective through this and in the astrological community. So nonviolent communication can help us to have positive self-talk with ourselves as well, which in turn can lower our snap judgments. It can lower the contribution to the cycle of violence through our own reactions. So, for example, if you say, I am observing my own emotions and what I'm feeling because I have a need for this. Like if I go through this process, like I'm observing my fear of saying the wrong thing because I have a need for being a peacemaker. I enjoy being a peacemaker, and having to go through that internal process of like, how do we engage with this and how do we educate ourselves, right? Like, so this is the internal conversation that you can have with yourself so that you are working through emotions that come up in difficult situations. So not only can you use it in conversations with other people, but you can use it with yourself. And there's some times where you do have to set really firm boundaries, right? Rosenberg talks about the use of protective force versus punitive force. I think in this circumstance, protective force was necessary. Protective force says this is a natural consequence of this action, and for the community to feel safe at this conference, this person needed to be removed. That is an example of protective force. It's hard to do. It's hard to separate that out. And again, we want to react to anything. And this isn't just in reference to this particular issue. This is when we get into any interpersonal conflict with somebody, oftentimes it can be hard to hear them because of the internal dialogue that we have going on. Dee says, Serapis was created by Ptolemy to unite Hellenistic and Cater mythologies. We could do with some of that unification energy. I agree. There was also some stories that I've read about Serapis as a solar deity that was related to also being the lord of the underworld, which is, I think, kind of appropriate. It is the sun, the understanding that sometimes the sun is above the horizon and is very visible, and that sometimes the sun goes below the horizon and then but is still burning very brightly, even if it is underground. And that can be good if you are hanging on to a positive belief that is not doing harm to other people, or it can be negative if you're holding on to something that sometimes can become hidden. So I think that's really important. Bonnie says they've uploaded an edited version of the Shadow Work podcast today, and that they had a version in which Stephen said the N-word instead of saying it as the original vid shows. They knew better. Yeah. That was really, the fact that they pre-recorded it, went through the process towards the end where they looked at each other and like, wait, we might have gone too far there. And then posted it anyway. It's kind of like, I'm just kind of like, really? This lack of self-awareness was really poignant and perplexing, to be quite honest. And this is, I'm somebody who tries to think very, very at length and ad nauseum about what the impact of my words are going to be. And I'm not perfect at this at all. So to see the flippancy around it was painful for me to watch, the ill-consideredness of it and just the pain it caused. Like, we've had a lot of discussions in our household about this issue, and just doing a lot of listening and seeing different perspectives and figuring out what the next steps are, because eventually you do have to move towards asking for what would create repair, right? That's part of the nonviolent communication system, where you say, I observed this happening. I observed this guy saying the N-word. It is making me feel very angry and very upset. And because I have a need for acceptance, respect, equality, would you be willing to not speak at this conference because I'm feeling I have a need for safety? Like, would you be willing to do some real accountability? Would you be willing to offer a legitimate apology rather than a half-assed one? Like, these are all things that you can go through that process and hopefully get to an identification of what needs were not being met by those actions. And then how do we move forward to the request part of it, or the protective force part of it, to help people restore safety in their communities. Bonnie says, I'm catching up on 2x speed. I'm not quite as up to the live discussion here yet. Well, I appreciate that you're doing the research there, Bonnie. I think it is important to engage with these things when they are something that has a wide-ranging effect and is revealing a lot of hidden character and a lot of hidden blind spots in a lot of people. And how do we work through that? And how do we, again, begin the journey of restoring trust with one another? I think that's my hope. And again, that does not happen in one day. That happens over many, many actions of accountability over time. Okay. So this decan is called the Lord of Valor. Like, there is a courageous energy where you have your back against the wall. You're fighting your way out. But again, in this case, because of the conjunction with K2, we may need to reduce that quality. Sometimes the decans can be instructive in what we don't want to lean into through a non-K, through our ignorance, through being compelled to act. Sometimes it's teaching us what would be a better approach. And with the North Node in Aquarius 3, there is an increase in the collective, in our collective Hemmermene, in moving away from defending a position. I'll show you. Let's bring up the Aquarius decans here, because I want to show you the opposite energy, because I think that leaning into it is important. So here is the Aquarius 3 decan, where we are stepping down, stepping away, leaving behind an old situation, unraveling karmic knots. That was really fascinating to see, like, because there was a connection between one of the things that was talked about in that podcast was Stephen Forrest's apparent lineage from Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a general in the Southern Army in the Civil War and the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. And he one of the many missteps that he made in that podcast was the revisionist history that the intentions of the KKK were righteous in the very beginning, and it was meant to protect Southern widows and things of that nature, which is ridiculous, okay, because it is a terrorist organization that had the specific purpose of murdering people of color. And that to me is like how do we unravel that karmic knot, right? Like maybe there is something in his lineage where that shadow work had to be passed down to another generation. Now, there's been other people that have said, well, you're not actually related to him. But the fact that he identified with that means that there is some sort of like cultural, I don't know what the word is, is a generational trauma, or that is sometimes generational trauma comes through the generational trauma that we perpetuate on others. How do we break those cycles? How do we unravel those karmic knots? How do we unravel the places of ignorance and come into awareness? So like the Five of Swords, you could carry with you the wisdom of what you've learned from a situation where you've had to step down off of a belief or off of a position of power. You might be leaving something behind. You have to leave something behind, okay? And you may be temporarily revisiting something with the daimon Osiris, because Osiris in Egyptian mythology was split up into many different pieces and spread across the countryside by Set, the brother of Isis. And Isis had to recollect those pieces, reconstruct Osiris, and then they copulated, and then the new king Horus, or the new god Horus, was born, and then Osiris had to be split up again, and he became the lord of the underworld. So that is a symbolic representation of sometimes we have to revisit things that we thought maybe were resolved or that we had repressed, and we have to feel the frustration. We have to feel the anger. We have to feel that this isn't right, and then do the hard work of unraveling that knot through communication, through empathy, and acknowledging the problem, and then going forth and making the actions to repair the damage and to hopefully move forward towards bridging towards a more equitable and fair future. So how do we lean into that, right? How do all of us, every single one of us, start to examine our deeply held beliefs and hills that we're willing to die on, and start to attempt objectivity through that, right? And attempt to unravel some of those old karmic knots, right? And some of those knots could be like, I don't know, being some of the events that we saw this week. I think some of the old karmic knots could be hiding when you need to speak up. Like this is something I've been wrestling with. Like this is like I had a lot of fear of doing more damage than repair. And that's a real fear I've had as someone who has been in a lot of conflict situations from a very young age. And just like kind of the fear of like being caught in the middle of a conflict and not knowing what to say to reduce some of the aggression and energy, you know. And also, it could also be like, how do we unravel feelings of I don't know, disempowerment as well? How do we come into power if we need to have a situation where we're stepping into the next equality kind of circumstance and situation? The other thing that I think that this increase could be is sometimes Aquarius will lean into this is something we've seen not necessarily in the Stephen Forrest situation, but in the collective oligarch fascist structure right now, is the increase of censorship. I think that Joy Usher has a really good book called The Tiny Universe, where she talks about Aquarius as the glass ceiling, where sometimes it's a demoralizing type of energy before we even engage with it. It's like the idea that you can't do something, or revisionist history is another version of that. Like not being able to teach a certain like critical race theory in school or something like that. Like we have literally seen our government try to take down historical exhibits at the Smithsonian in an attempt to bury the past and past abuses. And that's another representation of Aquarius. What I want to get across is that Aquarius is not it's not the 70s Hair musical, you know, like it is still Saturnine. There are still challenges around that particular energy versus, you know, the Leo energy. There are definitely positive qualities to Leo and Aquarius energy, but there are drawbacks to it as well. So how do we maintain our integrity and our individuality when the need arises for giving up some of our own wills and desires for the good of the collective? How do we give up some of our privilege for the good of the collective? These are important questions to ask, and there is a lot of ways that can manifest. The sun is being hosted, or the moon, excuse me, is being hosted by the sun. All right, so we have the moon being hosted by the sun, so they are conjoined at this eclipse with the co-presence here. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to take you through some of the lead up to the eclipse in the next few days, and then a few weeks afterwards. Before I do that, take a stretch break. If you would like to like the video and subscribe, you are welcome to do so. I do appreciate it. Not easy or comfortable conversations to have. And I think it's important to lean into our discomfort. I think that is really important. Like, a lot of things go unsaid and unremedied because it's not comfortable to talk about. And we want to sweep it under the rug, and we want to spiritual bypass it, and we don't want to have the tough conversations. A lot of people don't want to take responsibility or accountability, and they turn it into a joke and try to laugh it off. And that is something that is equally toxic, because it doesn't fully leave space for real empathy. So tough conversations today, but these are really deeply ingrained issues that are not always easy to face and talk about, but worthwhile to have the conversation. Okay. Let's start unpacking how this might play out. First thing, Let's bring the chart to the screen. All right. So here is the chart of the eclipse. Okay. So just to get your bearings, here is the sun and the moon at 20 degrees of Leo, very close to the south node. Eclipses happen when the new or the full moon are close enough to either the south node or the north node. And this is an interesting juxtaposition when we have new moon solar eclipses on K2 or the south node. And sometimes when we have full moon eclipses on the north node, because normally we think about initiating something on the new moon. But what we're really initiating is a release, right? Is the beginning of a letting go at this particular eclipse. Whereas we may have a peak of increase at the full moon lunar eclipse that we'll talk about briefly, but we'll have a full examination of moving forward. So the sun is in malefic enclosure here. Let's go back for a minute. So this is August 6th. This is another interesting Hellenistic technique where we can see that the sun here is being aspected on one side by Mars and on the other side by Saturn. And once the sun made a trine to Saturn, it was kind of enclosed between these two planets. Now, these aspects are trines and sextiles. So this particular malefic enclosure of the sun may be not quite as severe as if it was an opposition or square involved, but it still could be putting a lot of pressure on our feelings of visibility, authenticity, right? Of like, how do we show up? How do we become visible? How do we express ourselves authentically in a circumstance that is having a lot of pressure put on it by an out of bounds Mars in Gemini, where words and communications can be wielded as weapons, where Saturn in the second decan of Aries is in retrograde, is asking us to review our value system, right? That's putting a lot of pressure on our sense of identity. It's asking us really tough questions about our identity. And this is going to happen for the next 5 days leading up to the eclipse. Is a lot of processing about what does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be somebody else whose experience that we need to put ourselves in their shoes and acknowledge that sometimes when we are we and they are them, we can create damage. And how do we repair that, right? So sun in malefic enclosure for the next 5 days, examining identity, trying to become potentially a different, not necessarily different, but a newer version of ourselves through awareness and challenge, through awareness of the tendency. Mars in Gemini 3 has a tendency to create severing and separating through, I mean, this is just too on the nose, but it's through contrast, through black and white thinking, right? Through high contrast, this or that type of experience, and through ultimatums as well. We've seen a number of, I think, justified ultimatums coming through Mars and Gemini 3. But sometimes there are other ultimatums that are made that aren't justified and that can be really destructive. So how do we deal with that? The other thing I will say too is that Saturn retrograde in Aries, we've been working on this channel for many months now. Through, I think, maybe Devin turned me on to this, Esoteric Butcher. I think he turned me on to this, but I read this in Freedom Cole's book, The Science of Light. And it's a Vedic technique that says that there might potentially be a planet that is either exalted or in its fall, acting as its opposite, either acting fallen or exalted. So in this case, we have a fallen Saturn retrograde that may be acting exalted, which I can see the argument and justification for that. We just saw some very real consequences that were happening to someone who abused a position of power. What we have witnessed with Saturn direct in Aries is a lot of people getting away with abuses of power or abuses of excess yang energy. Here we had a very real world consequence that happened. We've also, I think a lot of people are reviewing, or I hope are reviewing, their value system, because a lot of the values that were exposed, mostly through Facebook, to be honest with you, were pretty ugly. There were some pretty ugly responses to this, and it really highlighted some of the work that needs to be done with a lot of people's personal value systems. So that's the malefic enclosure that's leading up to the eclipse, okay? Mercury will then move into Leo on the 9th, okay? So there's the 9th, where Mercury is moving into Leo and joining with the Sun and Jupiter. So we're tying up the loose ends of the Mercury retrograde cycle in Cancer in the next few days. We are reviewing the emotions that come out in our communications. We were reviewing the scarcity versus surplus versus scarcity questions, where someone may have more and someone may have less, and we're reviewing that. When Mercury moves into Leo 1, we may be asking questions. Remember, Mercury destabilizes, it asks questions. We might be asking questions about the roles that we play. We had that Jupiter Cazimi a few days ago, or at the full moon, and we have a seed planted for new roles that we could potentially play. When Mercury goes there, it's starting to stir up the alchemical mixture, and it's saying, is this role appropriate? What role do I need to play now? Maybe it was revealed at the full moon that the role I was playing wasn't appropriate, or the role that someone else was playing wasn't appropriate. Now we ask, what is the proper role? What does it mean to be in the spotlight? What does it mean to utilize our will in service of the collective rather than just in service of the self? So that's going to be happening on the 9th. On August the 10th, okay, we're going to take you up to the full moon lunar eclipse, okay? Venus will trine Pluto, oppose Neptune as Mars trines the North Node. So here's Venus in Libra. We have Venus in Libra now. Venus recently moved out of her fall and into her own domicile of Libra. So potentially increasing our ability to have empathy and see rebalance a situation that was out of balance. I will warn you, though, the first decan of Libra will often show us and spotlight and highlight an imbalance. And we've been kind of working through that right now as a community, of showing an imbalance of power, an imbalance of representation, an imbalance of I don't know, and just of equality in our spaces, okay? And that we'll be making that opposition to Neptune. So there is a Neptunian desire right now for individuation. There is a glamorization of independence and a glamorization of the new start, of sometimes a glamorization of violence. I think you could see this through the cinema quite a bit. The zeitgeist right now is the Odyssey, and I haven't seen it yet, so I can't make a full judgment on the Odyssey, but it is really a movie about war, and it is a glamour of war, right? So there is a lot of energy towards that, and how do we deal with the injustices and the glamorization of wars and battles, and in an attempt that Venus is doing to reharmonize an imbalance and an inequality. The Mars North Node kind of thing, that's interesting to me as far as like just maybe being able to make a choice and say, you know what, we have to sever and separate from one direction. We can't keep all of these ambiguities going. We have to choose a direction. And that direction may be in harmony with unraveling an old karmic knot that we have, that, or a blind spot or something of that nature. Now, the 11th, the day before the eclipse, there's just a lot going on. Mars moves into Cancer. Okay, so first of all, what that does is that gets us out of the malefic enclosure of the sun. So Mars will be not making a whole sign aspect to the sun any longer. Now, it changes the condition of Mars. It puts Mars into its fall. So Mars in Cancer shifts some of the conflict from communications, from technology, from internet challenges, to domestic ones, to family issues, to feminine issues, to sustenance issues. So Mars will be playing out its role of severing and separating in a different arena, and it will start making a square to Venus again via whole sign. Okay, we just got out of the whole sign square, but now it's re-engaging. That is separating though, so they're not coming closer into conflict. They're moving away from conflict from one another. But by whole sign, our conflicts in our domestic situations may be revealing inequalities and attempts to rebalance relationships. Okay. Pluto moves out of bounds. Retrograde Pluto moves out of bounds on the 11th. I'm actually really curious about this. I've been reading a book called Persephone's Revolution by Rosie Finn, and it talks about the out of bounds periods of Pluto. This one being of the southern declination, which means that it is going out of bounds in the normal the northern path south of the ecliptic that the sun would take. Now, symbolically, when Pluto goes out of bounds at extreme declinations, we see either a consolidation of abusive tyrannical power in the northern declination. The last period that we had with that was between the mid 30s and the early 40s. So it goes in and out of bounds for various lengths of time, but in the last century or so, for about 10 to 15 years at a time, it'll go in and out of bounds, right? This last southern declination one are normally considered periods of reform. So like I said, we had a really important election in Michigan recently with a reformer candidate, a Democratic socialist named Abdul El Said, whose intention is to reform some of the corrupt systems of government. He is running on getting money out of politics. He's running a somewhat of a similar platform as Mamdani is in New York, and returning some of the power to the people and taking it and reducing corporate power. And that is something that has been spoken to over and over and over again by Pluto out of bounds in the southern declination. Now, what is equally fascinating about this, it's first of all, it's not always just a peaceful revolution. The southern declination out of bounds periods with Pluto has coincided with the French Revolution, the American Revolution, things like that. What I find extra interesting about this, though, is that Pluto's been going in and out of bounds, this cycle of the rise of tyrannical power and the revolutionary reform response, for about 4,000 years. So we've been going through this like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But this is the last reform period and the last out of bounds period for Pluto, because it has a really elongated orbit, ecliptical orbit. Okay. It's not going to go out of bounds for another 3,000 years. That to me is extraordinarily exciting and hopeful, because Pluto is a planet of power. It's a planet of death. It's a planet of transformation, but it will be acting quote unquote normally rather than extreme. And maybe that means that people come to this planet and they live a life and then they pass on, rather than power structures artificially creating extremes of birth and death, etc., through these exploitative cycles, or exploitative governments, exploitative colonialism, racism. And I'm not saying that we will solve all of these problems in the next decade, because Pluto goes out of bounds in the southern declination, in and out of bounds until 2035. But I am hopeful that the reform that we do make during this next 10-year cycle could be really, really powerful. And it does give me some hope that this really destructive, push and pull could start to balance out and become, I don't know if benign is the right word, but more peaceful, more fair. What an interesting manifestation that would be, right? I've been reading about out of bounds Pluto cultures that some of them they can't even find weapons that they had because they didn't need them. Think about that for a minute. Think about a society that doesn't need weapons because they don't have the destructive, mostly patriarchal power structures of abuse and domination. Wow. I just, if that is even remotely possible in our lifetime, I just marvel at what that could be like. And this is one of the first kind of hopeful astrological symbols that shows me that there's even a potential for some of that to happen. So if you needed a little bit of hope that some of these destructive cycles could be resolving themselves, now it's not going to be easy. Like the next 10 years could be wild. But I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and it makes me hopeful. So we will have another period of Pluto going out of bounds between August the 11th and December the 10th. Okay. Interestingly enough, Saturn will station direct again on December the 10th. So those two things are sort of intertwined a little bit in this cycle. Mercury will also oppose Pluto on that day, so there may be some communications that reveal corruption. There may be some really spicy communications where, we're questioning our roles or the roles of others, and it could be collective needs versus individual needs that are coming to the forefront again, that are echoing the themes of that full moon that we've just experienced and some of the challenges we've just experienced. Mercury will trine Neptune on that day as well. So we have to be clear about the facts. We have to be clear about what we're actually witnessing. I think that that's important to do too. And again, creating a little bit of space to gain clarity on situations, I think is really important. And then Venus will trine Uranus on this day as well. That's kind of cool that we may be seeing some really fascinating manifestations in relationships where maybe we have some good ideas about how to communicate better with one another to start to heal some of the imbalances. Again, I've been obsessed with this book, this Marshall Rosenberg book. I want to keep working with it because I know that just reading the book is not enough. I need to keep practicing these things. I've been feeling like it's completely rewiring my brain. I've used it in a lot of situations recently that were high conflict, and just in communications with my family too, and like trying to diffuse long-standing situations. And it's been really useful, and especially in one-on-one relationships. Now, is it 100% effective in social issues and relationships? That I am still trying to determine. I think that there are situations, again, where protective force is important and is necessary. But how do we start working together to unravel some of these things without adding to that cycle? That's a question I've been trying to answer, well, for much of my life, but also recently as well. So that brings us to the eclipse on the 12th. So we've kind of looked at that. So just to review, Mercury and Jupiter will be conjoining or co-present, I guess, with the eclipse at 20 degrees of Leo. It's a south node eclipse where something is draining away over the period of 6 months or more. We have the Mars-Venus square that is part of the eclipse. It's sort of baked in. The challenges of domestic getting what we need in personal relationships. Again, I can't recommend this book, Nonviolent Communication, enough for personal relationships and interrelationships. We have the trine with Saturn, okay, a retrograde Saturn in a fallen position that could be potentially acting as exalted. Those are the main features that I think are prominent in my observation of the eclipse. Let's see. Tanya says we should obviously be solving our most intractable differences through breakdance battles. Oh, that's why I love you. Bringing a little levity to it. Like what? Like Despicable Me with like that dude with like the mullet and the bubble gum, and they're like breakdance fighting. I wish that it was that simple. I think that I would much rather see a breakdance battle than some of the battles that we've seen recently just in the collective. I think sometimes moving our bodies and being able to physically release some of that adrenaline, I think could be important. But yes, I agree. The really interesting thing about the days following the eclipse is that the moon will be void of course. Okay. Let's see. Stella said, I used to do that as a Mars K2 in Aquarius. Do dance fighting. I'm just picturing like Kevin Bacon, right? Kevin Bacon in Footloose, just like he's so mad and he's in the warehouse and he's just dancing it out, like yeah, there you go. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so one of the main features of the days after the eclipse, the moon is going to go void of course. Okay, and this is a feature that actually repeats at the full moon lunar eclipse as well. So a void of course moon is when the moon is not making a traditional aspect to it, or an aspect to a traditional planet within 30 degrees. And it can also cross sign boundaries. The modern definition has a cutoff at a sign boundary, and it happens much more frequently. This Hellenistic void of course moon does not happen as much. So you could see here that the Virgo moon, we're not going to have any aspects to any of these traditional planets, right? It's already, after it is released from the bond here, it's not going to make this, it is going to make a sextile to Mars, and that begins the void of course. So that's the last aspect it makes after the eclipse. And then it's not making an aspect to Venus. It's not making an aspect to Saturn. It's not making an aspect to either of these planets in Leo. And the next aspect that it's actually going to make is the square to Mars. So it's going to go through the entire sign of Virgo, void of course. So, because eclipses are Hemer-Mene heavy events, oftentimes we sort of have to just ride the wave. We have to observe. We don't want to make huge actions and commitments during these periods of time, because it is really just giving us the new terms of the story that's going to be unfolding. And in this particular case, taking an action right away may not be the best advisable thing from your local friendly astrologer, because void of course moons, it tends to be nothing comes of the matter. So whatever is revealed to you, maybe it is a revelation of a belief that you have to start to let go of, or a position of power that you have to step down off of. You don't necessarily have to take action right at the eclipse. Let a couple days pass. Get some space between the feelings that comes up with it and how you respond to it, so that you can respond with objectivity. Maybe you also respond with more information and in a way that could lead to a better outcome moving forward. Stella says breakdance battles. Yep. Natalia is here, sorry. Says that's what the Olympic Games were resumed for, which still did not prevent world wars, but an attempt was made. Yeah, it's the Olympics is sort of like the breakdance battle of on a big global scale, right? And we literally had breakdancing that went horribly wrong. Man, Australia, come on, like, but but yeah, like mock battles, right? When we see the first decan of Leo, that is a mock battle. It's an athletic competition. Like it's hopefully letting us have catharsis without the actual, like, getting out some of those feelings and competitive feelings, and maybe even some of those feelings of pride in our country without having to destroy another country to feel that. It's really interesting to me. Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of the Olympic Games as a young person, because I love seeing just people come together for that purpose. I love sports, but I also love the idea behind it. Now, I do have criticisms of it as far as the commercialization of it and the damage it can do to communities and the environmental impact it has in the countries that it has gone through, and everything can eventually become corrupted. But the essence of it, there is something really beautiful about people coming together and competing, but then also hopefully making friends and friendships along the way. So the void of course moons goes from the 13th of August to the 15th. It starts with a sextile to Mars, and it ends with a square to Mars in Libra. Okay. Kate says a lot of social movements and uprisings starts at the games. Interesting. Maybe people are communicating in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that it could be a really beautiful manifestation, right? Like maybe they can't have contact with people outside of their own country, but at the Olympic Games, they have that ability to like gain a new perspective and see things from someone else's eyes. And that to me is really valuable at this period of time. Okay. So during the void of course moon, it doesn't mean that other aspects aren't happening. It just means that the moon manifestations may be delayed. Mercury will go under the beams at 6 degrees of Leo on the 13th. So here is Mercury going under the beams. Okay. We may be going... Now this is what is more interesting, because this is Mercury or Hermes visiting Olympus rather than visiting the underworld when it might be retrograde. So think about how you might be receiving messages from some external source rather than necessarily an internal one. Maybe you are hearing messages from the collective that are very important, that could help you to understand your new role or your new identity as Mercury goes through the under the beams period in Leo. And eventually it's going to have a cazimi in the first degrees of Virgo. So you might be able to take those realizations that you get from the collective that are showing you the roles that you need to play. Okay, a lot of times when we have conflicts like we're experiencing this week, it shows us the roles that we need to play, or the changes that we need to make in the roles that we are playing already. A lot of people have taken on the role of a teacher or of a guru, and they may need to make some pretty serious changes around the way that they carry out that role, or step away from that role if it's not an appropriate role for them at the time. Okay. Natalia says, interestingly enough, usually countries don't take part in each other's games when protesting wars. The U.S. team did not compete in Moscow, as the U.S. boycotted games because the USSR invaded Afghanistan. I mean, when you have that many international bodies coming together, it is a statement, right? It can be a statement of the greater political challenges. And maybe it doesn't feel safe when people are in actual physical, military conflicts with one another to be in someone else's country. I can see that from a practical perspective, is like, if you have athletes that are coming into a country that they're actively at war at, the potential to be a political prisoner is increased as well. So, I mean, there's safety issues around that too. But it can also be a statement on a world stage and bring awareness to conflicts as well. They're really interesting. Olympics are really interesting to me. I've always been fascinated by it, and have found a lot of inspiration through seeing people's dreams come true, but also through demonstrations of sportsmanship across borders. I think that's something that I have an idealized hope for. Like, even when I was a young hockey player, my teammates my teammates gave me a lot of shit because I had a lot of friends on other teams. Like, I would just, at the end of the day, I was like, hey, good game, let's be friends. Like, it was less about like me versus you, and just it's been something that's been a value of mine for quite a long time. Okay, so Mercury goes into the beams, preparing for the Cazimi, and sextiles Venus. So as it goes under the beams, we might be questioning our role and testing out new roles because of a perceived need to rebalance an inequality in our lives or socially, okay, which we're working on as a community right now. Mercury conjoins Jupiter on the 15th, and also we see the end of the void of course moon. Okay, so at the Mercury Jupiter conjunction at about 10 degrees or so of Leo, we might be, that's the point where we start to figure out what our authentic expression is out in the world. Like, that second decan says, hey, now there's a marriage between what you're feeling inside and how you're able to express it publicly. And we also see the end of the void of course moon from the first aspect that the moon makes to Mars. Okay, so as Mercury and Jupiter are coming together, the moon is going to activate that first decan of Libra that is showing us an imbalance, and potentially within personal relationships, because that is where Mars is hanging out, in the decan of one-on-one intimate relationships, domestic situations. We might have to take on a new role in our domestic situations, in our relationships. That could be a manifestation of this, of reharmonizing responsibility between intimate partners. That's something that is always important, I think, to reevaluate every few years, or maybe just regularly, maybe even every day. You know what I mean? Like, check in with your partner. Don't let things simmer and say, hey, this has gotten unfair. Like, how do you have positive communication? I know with my partner and I, we have a weekly and sometimes daily check-in about, like, hey, what do you have going on today? Like, what is on your plate, and how do we support each other within that? How do we give each other enough space to do the work that we each need to do? What needs to get done, and how do we get the work done in a way that is hopefully equitable? All right, on the 17th, okay, you could see I'm clicking around the aspects of the eclipse that is static on the inner wheel, and on the outer wheel we have the aspects. Mars will square Neptune on the 17th, as well as Mercury trining Saturn and Venus sextiling Jupiter. So I really think kind of the Mars-Neptune square sticks out a little bit. Like, I think that when we are trying to rebalance inequalities within our personal relationships, we may have some confusion about who we are as an individual and what our individual needs are. I would again redirect you back to nonviolent communication, which, let's not beat around the bush here. Nonviolent communication isn't like pacifism or rolling over. What it is being able to get in touch with both your feelings and connect it to your needs, and holding space for someone else's needs and feelings and acknowledging them and having empathy for them, and then working together on a solution through requests versus demands. And I think that this is a point where when we're working on new roles with one another within our relationships to rebalance inequalities and socially, not just in personal relationships, but socially as well, uh, being able to um, get clear about what we're feeling and connect it to what we're needing. I see a lot of a lot of the defensiveness that comes through some of the challenges that we're facing communally right now. A lot of people may be feeling defensive because they have a need to be seen as a quote unquote good person, or have a need for respect, or have a need for or something. Just as people who are angry, who are not getting their needs met through systemic racism, for respect, for equality, for uh, being able to be treated fairly and in an equitable fashion. So how do we get in touch with those needs? And sometimes we're in touch with those needs clearly. Other times we have to do the hard work of parsing through what those feelings are actually speaking towards. Sometimes we have a lot of mixed feelings and multiple needs happening at the same time. I do think it can be really helpful to sort of try to parse those things out, because it's easier, I think, to get a clear need met when it's not convoluted with a lot of other needs. So how can you identify and then separate out these needs? And they could be interconnected for sure, but I think it's important to identify them individually, which makes it easier to take actions that could meet them, or even take a collective series of actions that could meet them in unison as well. Jupiter emerges as the morning star on the 18th of August. Okay, you can see Jupiter at 10 degrees, separating by 15 degrees to the sun. This to me is a continuation of the Jupiter Cazimi cycle. You had Jupiter Cazimi at the last full moon, and it was a seed planted for a new role that we may be playing, that could be feeling pressure to perform under. And now at this point in the cycle, we may have some more information about what our authentic expression could be. What is the role that is truly a representation of who we are and what we feel in our hearts, and how do we move forward with that and show up publicly as the most authentic expression of ourselves. So I think that's a really important day. And keep an eye on your Sagittarius and Pisces houses as well, because Jupiter will be providing resources for them, and there is events that will be connected to those other topics via the Leo house. The first quarter moon is happening on the 19th. Okay, so here is the 19th first quarter moon in Scorpio, question mark? Yeah, there it is, Scorpio. So it is the third decan sun that is going to be squaring the third decan Leo sun. It's going to be squaring the third decan Scorpio moon. So we have a domiciled sun, but a fallen moon. Now, this decan of Scorpio is a Venus-ruled decan in a Mars-ruled sign. And to me, the Decanic story is an unfolding of an identification of that which needs to be released, an identification of a form that is no longer serving us with vitality, and a need to release the energy and the vitality from that form, return the form to the earth, and then let the vitality and energy find a new form that can support it. When we get to the third decan, I think that the Ananke of this square, the forces that it compel us through ignorance, might be to glamorize an old form, because this Venus-ruled decan sometimes will lead us to an illusion that we can keep something alive that has already, died, right? I'm thinking the first thing that comes to mind is all of the talk about like Mitch McConnell and all these things, right? Who knows what's going on there? But there are lots of things in our life that we try to keep alive through our pride. I think this is definitely a square where we may be trying to keep something alive because we want to maintain our grasp on a position of power or on a belief that is no longer serving us. And we may have to increase our ability to let go, to return that to the earth, to go through the achemical nigredo process of like breaking it down and then letting it go. So that might be part of the challenge around this first quarter moon. Okay. Let's see. Kate says, I am manifesting getting a gift that day with Jupiter becoming visible. I hope that works out for you, Kate. I hope the gift is one of authentic expression. I hope that's it. Kate says, I always think of Game of Thrones, see people saying, what is dead may never die. I could see that. So first quarter moon, you may feel an increased desire to hang on to the old belief and the old form, but really this whole lunation cycle is about release. It's about stepping down off of the throne of power, seeing things from another person's perspective or the collective's perspective, of willingly maybe stepping away from something. And I think the sooner that we come into alignment with that, the easier it's, the less harm it will cause. Because when we willingly step down off of a throne of power, there's less violence that we perpetrate trying to defend an undefendable position, right? That's what we witnessed this last week, a defense of an undefendable position. And all it does is just create more pain in people. Okay. Venus opposes Saturn on the 21st. So here is Venus opposing Saturn at 14 degrees of Libra and 14 degrees of Aries. This is interesting to me because this decan, a little bit different than the first decan. This decan of Libra that Venus is in is a Saturn-ruled decan that speaks towards both binding of vows and of agreements, but also negotiation. I think that we might be seeing a negotiation happening, but that negotiation hitting a brick wall when it runs into Saturn, right? We might be attempting to see things from someone else's perspective, but they may be feeling really bound to an individual set of values or self-centered needs rather than being able to see something from someone else's perspective. I just think that this is a difficult negotiation day in particular. And that's something that we should be aware of moving into it. Like, how do we see something from someone else's perspective while also understanding what our own needs are in that negotiation? The sun will conjunct the south node on the 22nd, right as the sun, and then the sun will move into Virgo. Okay, so it'll have a conjunction with the south node and then move into Virgo at the end of that day. So this is the draining energy of the eclipse sun, where we see the seed of the drain, and then the sun goes down the drain. The song I picked for this week was Black Hole Sun, which is very eclipse coded, of like washing away the rain. And maybe the rain is like has a double entendre, like the reign of the king, right? The reign of an abusive autocrat. I do think that could be part of this eclipse cycle, is the Hemermene coming for people who have abused power. So that this is very interesting to me. And then that draining could lead to an awareness of the skills that we need to build back up in a way that could be more equitable in the future. So the sun will be in Virgo 1 from the 22nd of August to the 2nd of September. Mercury will conjoin the south node on the 25th. Okay, so here's Mercury on the south node here. There it is. It will go through the same process that the sun went through, the conjoining with the south node in Leo, and then move into its domicile and exaltation in Virgo, which is really empowering for Mercury. So our ability to communicate will shift from maybe one that is steeped in passion and pride. We have to really be careful of this through August, is communicating from a place of defending a belief that is not really worth defending anymore. And we might move past that when we finally release that old belief and the desire to communicate from that position into being a little bit more curious when Mercury moves into Virgo, being able to learn new skills around it. And again, you can be proactive about these things. You can be proactive about learning empathetic communication skills. This is, again, something that I've really been putting a focus on. I'm not perfect at it. I'm not always good at it. There's a reason why I really want to dive into it, because there's been times in the past where I just really haven't been able to do that. And that's leading us to the Mercury Cazimi on the 27th. So here's the conjunction of Mercury and the Sun at 4 degrees of Virgo. Maybe starting a new program where you're learning something, new, where you could be signing up for a class. You could be learning a new series of skills for communication. You could be working very diligently on your craft. This is the 8 of Pentacles, Decan. It is squared Uranus almost exactly. So you may be feeling paralyzed by a lot of different options. It could be there's like a million different classes you want to take, and you're like, I don't know which one would be the best. And it just feels like a proliferation of options, and you might have to pare them down a little bit at this Cazimi. And that's leading us into the full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces the day after this. So coming right off of the eclipse, we have this, or coming right off the Cazimi, we have this lunar eclipse, right? So if we go back, and here's the lunar eclipse, 4 degrees. This lunar eclipse is on Fomalhaut. Fomalhaut is a fixed star associated with charisma, but the using the charisma for positive empowerment rather than using charisma to manipulate people. That's kind of the downfall of that particular fixed star, is abuse of charisma. We may also be feeling a need to leave something behind. We have this eclipse on the North Node in Aquarius, which is talking about revisiting something to unravel a karmic knot. But the first decan of Pisces talks about leaving behind material success in search of a higher purpose and higher meaning. So we may be doing that by unraveling our old karmic knots and leaving a position behind or something like that. The culmination of that initial eclipse energy is stepping away from something and learning new skills. I think that's the balance point, is how do we step away from the old belief but lean into learning new skills that could make us more effective at the positions that we do want to take. Let's see. Kate says, I always think of the Game of Thrones, see people say what is dead man. I think I said that one. Karen says, hi Spencer and Tanya, and all joining late but glad to have made it. Yeah, we've been going through a lot of astrology today, Karen. We've been going through a lot of reflection, and especially about some events in the astrological community. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see it from the beginning at some point, but I'm glad that you're here, and hope that you're doing well, my friend. Okay, so that's getting us to the eclipse. Just the last few little bits of information here. Mercury is going to square Uranus on the eclipse here, just as we were speaking towards. The moon goes void of course again after that eclipse, and the sun also squares Uranus. So we got Mercury and the sun squaring Uranus that same day at that eclipse, and the moon going void of course. Now look at the moon doing its void of course dance, I guess. Let's see. What is the first aspect it's making here? I guess the void of course moon starts. What does it start with? I have it written down. It starts with a trine to Mars, and interesting. Like it should. The interesting thing to me is that it's starting with a trine to Mars, but then it makes an aspect to the sun. So maybe it's actually the sun starts it, the opposition starts it, and then it doesn't make another, because I had it written down as the trine to Mars, but maybe it's not the trine to Mars. Oh no, it is. Sorry, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. It starts with the trine to Mars, after a few hours of the opposition. So we have this trine to Mars here, okay, at about 10 degrees, 10 or 11 degrees here. And then it goes void for 57 hours, right? Until it makes the square with Mars in Aries. All right, so another void of course moon. Void of course moon ends on the 30th. The way that I utilize void of course moons, I clean my house. I do something low stakes where I want to get rid of something because I don't want to manifest something. I want to release something. So void of course moons can be really good for releasing things. That to me is a way to utilize that energy. What do you want to release, right? And I think eclipse periods are good times to release things, especially with this south node new moon solar eclipse, and then we've got another one that's associated with the north node in a position or a decan related to release. Last but not least, we have Venus entering her retrograde shadow at 22 degrees of Libra on the 31st, while Jupiter also trines Saturn retrograde. So this is preparing us for a Venus retrograde I believe in October. So we'll be seeing Venus retrograding in Scorpio coming all the way back to this degree, helping us to understand how we maintain our center while a lot of things are getting chaotic. I mean, I'm thinking about just going into an election cycle in the United States and all the rhetoric that happens in this country around this period of time. And I feel exhausted even just thinking about it. But how do we maintain our peaceful center while all of this noise is being perpetuated around us? I think that's going to be really important. How do we keep our heads and keep our cool? Okay, so that's the astrology around this eclipse. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, ends with the square to Mars, Kate. You got it. I have an I-Ching and I have an animal for you, so let's talk about that. But do me a favor, please like the video and subscribe. If you are joining late, I've got a Tolkien book club starting on Wednesday. If you'd like to join a small group for Baron and Luthien, what we're doing at Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a lot of fun. And I'm seeing a lot of the social issues echoed through Tolkien's work because he lived through some really dynamic times. And I think for the most part, his approach was one of grace and really like seeing the power of the little person, literally the little person against like autocratic power. And it's been really kind of instructional in that way. Okay. So here we go. Let's look at this hexagram. 60. Limitation. Moving towards joy. So I'm going to read to you from Jack Balkin. And hexagram 60 translates to limitation, control, restriction, articulation, separating and distinguishing, setting boundaries, constraint, and self-control. The judgment says limitation, success, but one should not engage in bitter limitation. Excuse me. Limitation is a necessary element of a happy life. Limiting expenditures is necessary to remain solvent. Limiting passions is a necessity for maturity and sound judgment. The best limitations are those we choose for ourselves. They strengthen our character and make life easier to bear. You're facing a situation in which limitation is necessary. Perhaps you've taken on too much, or perhaps you've become self-indulgent or carried things to extremes. Whatever the problem, it is up to you to rectify matters by enforcing boundaries and reining things in a bit. Moderation is the key here. You have to strike a new balance in your life. To do that, you will need to exercise some self-restraint. If you work at self-discipline, it will eventually come naturally to you. Adopting good habits and doing the right thing will become easy rather than a burden. The same principle applies to your finances. Keep an eye on your expenditures and avoid anything that is too extravagant. Be prudent without being stingy. Okay, so we're facing a need to limit our passions. Limit our negative beliefs and see things like with the North Node in a Saturnian sign. Like limitation could be really important for something that we want to increase. Maybe it's even just keeping ourselves under control. We have a changing line. In the fourth place, it says serene limitation, success. Serene limitation is self-restraint that has become easy because it derives from a cultivation of character. Work at developing self-discipline and it will come naturally to you. Let moderation, balance, and restraint become part of your everyday life. Then you will find that doing the right thing and avoiding the wrong thing becomes easy. You'll be able to apply your energies to the task at hand without distraction, and this will help ensure your success. If you don't adopt good habits, then life becomes much more difficult. You will be able to exercise self-control and finish what you start only through an enormous exertion of will and effort. Realism is an important part of this equation. Look at the situation with a clear head and be willing to adapt where necessary. Accommodating yourself to present conditions does not mean giving up your principles or surrendering your ultimate goals. Rather, it means not fighting battles that will simply exhaust your resources and make it difficult for you to succeed later on. I'm just laughing because it's like we're literally seeing this eclipse saying, just stop fighting all these unwinnable battles, right? Step off the hill and stop, you don't have to die on this hill. And the I-Ching says it again, right? Deal with one thing at a time and don't try to do more than the present situation permits. Take the longer view. Remember that persistent effort and preparation over time will allow you to achieve things that you could not achieve all at once. Be patient. Take the long view. This will lead to hexagram 58, joy, the lake, giving and receiving, communication, sharing, integrity, inner stability, inner peace. The judgment says joy, success, it is beneficial to persevere. Joy comes from inner peace and inner balance. It requires integrity and strength within, and gentleness and acceptance without. Put differently, joy is a matter of character on one hand and communication on the other. People lack joy because they lack inner stability. Then they chase after pleasure that cannot fill the emptiness inside them. People lack joy because they cannot freely communicate with others. Then they are cut off from the pleasures of shared experience. In the Book of Changes, joy is symbolized by two lakes that are joined together. Their waters flow freely into each other and thus replenish each other. Yet, although the two lakes freely share with each other, each retains its individual integrity. I think that's a really great image for this nodal axis. How do we flow into one another, create through communal goals, but retain our integrity and our individuality within that? When we talk about communal goals, it doesn't mean we want to homogenize everyone into being the same. This is the beauty of diversity. We can have different roles and we can have different perspectives, and we can still be working towards collective goals. That's so important to recognize, right? Like, diversity is not a threat necessarily to the right type of collective action. If that collective action is for the people and for the masses and towards equality. What it is a threat to is consolidated oligarchical colonial power, right? That's why they want to eliminate diversity. It is a reflection of making people easier to control because we are so strong in our diversity, in our diverse perspectives. Think of all the intelligence that is able to be shared with one another through our specific areas of genius. It's just such a powerful reflection and just thought that is flowing through me right now, and just realization. So let's see. We're talking about inner stability, inner peace. Oftentimes, people lack joy because they lack inner stability. They chase after pleasures that cannot fill the emptiness inside of them. People lack joy because they cannot freely communicate with others. They are cut off from the pleasures of shared experience. In the Book of Changes, joy is symbolized, I talked about that part. Joy emerges naturally from freely communicating and sharing experiences with others. It is infectious. If you are cheerful and happy, you will make others feel cheerful and happy as well. When people are optimistic and outgoing, they share their thoughts and experiences more easily. Reach out to other people in the spirit of goodwill. Let people know that you're interested in what they have to say. Work to create a positive, accepting atmosphere. If you are warm and friendly, people will respond naturally and positively, and they will be willing to help you and to give you the benefit of their perspective. If you try to make people feel joyous through devious means or through manipulating them, you may have temporary success, but without the creation of trust and mutual respect, joy cannot last. When people take joy in each other's company, they are willing to make sacrifices for each other. Difficulties seem to melt away. troubles seem smaller and less threatening than before. When people feel supported and encouraged, they are willing to take on even the most difficult tasks. Thus, joy has enormous power. It brings people together. It moves them to do great things and bestows success on their efforts. Be joyful in trying to create change in your life. You know, I mean, that joy is infectious and enthusiasm is contagious, right? So how do you bring that great joy into what you want to build in this world? You know, I often, this nonviolent communication book speaks to, what do we want to build? Yes, we want to be able to express with honesty the things that either cause harm or that we're disappointed or angry or hurt about, because we want to identify the needs. We want to identify what we want to create together and then express that clearly. That to me is what this hexagram is bringing towards. Kate says, this hits close. I'm multitasking right now to study phlebotomy tube additives and thinking limit astrology. Oh wait, right? No, you take joy in whatever you're studying, Kate. You know, find the right balance and mixture. All right. Well, this leads us to our animal. Here it is. It's the owl. I love when we get owls at eclipse periods. I feel like this has happened before. We literally see the owl's eyes as a manifestation of the solar eclipse. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that beautiful, like, you know, beautiful blazing sun yellow, and then the dark pupil of the moon. It really is a beautiful manifestation. I'm going to read to you from Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. The owl symbolizes wisdom, adaptability, and resourcefulness. Owl can turn its head 270 degrees due to the 14 vertebrae in its neck, which makes up for the fact that its eyes are immobile. When owl turns its head, its blood supply is cut off to the brain, but it has the ability to pool blood for use by the brain when the neck turns. Owls have binocular vision that gives them great depth perception. It means that while you tend to focus straight ahead, you don't ignore what's happening around you. In fact, you see more deeply than others, are quick to understand situations and store resources for future use. This animal has a talent for accuracy, exceptional hearing, intelligence, intuitive knowledge, silent movement, and wisdom. It has challenges around detachment, secretiveness, standoffishness, and superiority. When owl appears, it means you should pay attention to everything around you. Not only what you can see, but what you hear and what you intuitively know and feel. There are great important changes coming your way, and you need to be aware and prepared to accept them. This is a time to be silent and observe. Anything hidden will be revealed at this time. Owl means that you can see the truth behind the disguise, the intention behind the actions, the unexplained within reality. In many traditions, owl is a messenger of death. This doesn't necessarily mean a physical death, but is symbolic of a major life disruption, transition, or other change. Maybe you're getting married, or having a child, or moving to a new country. This symbolic death is often very positive. Owl is also connected to the wisdom of the ages. It seeks knowledge through its keen observation skills. You too glean your knowledge by observing, reading, and absorbing everything you can to give you that same wisdom. You are insightful and tend to know just the right thing to say to open someone's eyes to other possibilities. When owl appears, it often means something big is about to happen to you. Be prepared. This animal can assist you when you need to see someone as they truly are. We've gotten a lesson in that recently. Or to get to the bottom of something. Owl urges you to look at every situation from all angles to see the truth hidden inside. You are very intelligent, crave knowledge of all kinds, and also learn through observation. Owl can help you study better, retain information longer, and recall what you know when you need it. Since owl is nocturnal, you may frequently pull all-nighters when studying, or you may get so wrapped up in what you're reading that you don't even realize the time. If you're feeling lost or surrounded by darkness, owl reminds you that you see perfectly in such conditions, so keep moving silently forward as it guides you into the light. I love it. I mean, we literally have a shutting off of the light. That this is what an eclipse does. In this case, the new moon solar eclipse is shutting off the light of the sun. So we have to utilize these skills of the owl to see in the dark. We have to move silently and observe. We have to be able to use our other senses, our intuition. We have to use our hearing. We have to trust all the things that are going on around us. Okay, we have to be able to hunt silently for more information and wisdom. I think that all of these things can help us during eclipse periods when maybe the rational parts of us get kind of switched off for a period of time. We have to trust that intuitive wisdom, that intuitive knowing that the owl can represent. And we have to be able to see things from so many different perspectives and be able to look in all directions to see and become more objective. This is what this eclipse is asking us for, objectivity, and being able to trust some of the intuitive insights that arise through that exploration. All right, my friends. That's what I've got for you today. Let's see. Kate says, the animal means a lot to me too. I love it. Kate says, walking in a blizzard when I was little, I crossed paths with a snowy owl. Nice. I've had an experience with a barred owl, which is diurnal, actually. I saw a barred owl during the day. They have a lot of different calls, and that was a really powerful experience. So, yeah. Let's see. Natalia says, I should have asked as you were discussing that aspect, but with the natal moon at Leo 3 opposing Mercury and Venus at Aquarius 3, Mercury being my ascendant ruler, do you have a quick tip for me? Let's see. Moon at Leo 3 opposing Mercury and Venus, Aquarius 3. Well, the eclipse is going to be on your natal moon. I seem to remember you expressing that your moon was in the 12th house. Is that right? That would probably be right if it's Virgo rising and Mercury is your ascendant ruler. I think that there is some instinctual stuff that will be coming up, bubbling up from your unconscious, that are helping you become aware of the ways that maybe you might have repressed beliefs or hills that you might stand on that you need to let go of, that would help you to enhance North Node conjoining Mercury and Venus in Aquarius 3, enhance your ability to be objective, to unravel old karmic knots through being able to see things from another person's or another group's perspective. I think that's really important. Is how can you examine during this eclipse maybe some of the repressed things that could be working against your feelings of self-empowerment. Could also be like beliefs in your ability, in confidence. Could be like a confidence type of thing too. Like a lot of times Virgo risings, a lot of their hidden shadow energy is feeling confident enough for visibility, right? So how do you work through those challenges of visibility, but also seeing things from someone else's perspective as well? I hope that's helpful for you, Natalia. Kate says, later in life, learning Pallas Athena has joined my son, gave me a newfound perspective of owls and my affection and respect for them. Oh, that's a nice insight, because Athena had the owl of wisdom in Greek mythology. Javier says, the cherries I'm eating are karma brand. So this is a sign. I love it. We get all sorts of symbols all over the place, right? Natalia says, thank you. Seems very accurate. I am happy to be of service, Natalia. And I hope that this eclipse brings some good insights for you, and that everything works out well for you, friend. Kate says, any dental work? Just seems very physical, mental, verbal to have this Mercury on the eclipse. Could be, potentially. Kate says, eat the karma, Javier. Absolutely. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for holding space today, for going on the journey for from my observation, the community that we've built here in this channel specifically has been very kind and willing to do a lot of hard work as far as questioning their own shadow stuff and to work through some of those challenges. So I want to just applaud you for those efforts, and hopefully we can continue to work on those things together to bring about a more fair and just civilization externally and in our personal lives and in relationship with ourselves too. A lot of some of the things that happen out in the world that hurt other people are because we are not aware of what we need and what we are doing, or our blind spots. And when we do the hard work to bring awareness and paranoia to our blind spots, to our shadow, whatever it might be, we can become better citizens of the world. When we become more peaceful and more aware, self-aware, then that helps us to know ways to express and that aren't going to be harmful or hurtful to other people. So appreciate y'all being here. Appreciate all of you in the community, and hopefully we'll just be able to continue to move through this cycle, gaining awareness and grace along the way. All right. Thank you, friends. Appreciate all of you being here today. And yes, wonderful talk. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And yeah, appreciate all of you. Remember, go get Marshall Rosenberg's book if that's useful for you in your individual relationships. Maybe we'll have deeper discussions on ways to utilize something like this or something different when it comes to social issues. But try to be kind to yourself during these periods and carry that out into your communities. Always default to kindness, I think. I think this is a huge way of being in the world. Hold people accountable. Take accountability in your life. The other reason I can recommend nonviolent communication, it's about taking responsibility for your actions and your own feelings. And if we can do that, if we can take responsibility for our own actions and our own feelings, that can help us to be responsible with our actions and our feelings out in the world where we do less harm, right? And maybe we build a better community together based on equality, diversity, and peace. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. We'll see you in the next time. And yeah, reach out if you have any questions or if you want to schedule a reading or if you want to be part of our book club. Go support Tanya at Third Coast Mojo. And yeah, have a great week. Peace.